Every once in a while, there's a picture in the book. I think I showed you the one of my mom and my grandmom and I at the table. This one is in there. I love that picture. Maybe it's a little hard to see, but... And I put a big epigraph on this chapter because it went so well with the photograph. It's Adrienne Rich, An Atlas of the Difficult World, apart from that, a little piece from that. What homage will be paid to a beauty built to last, from inside out, executing the blueprint of resistance and mercy, drawn up in a childhood in that little girl, round-faced with clenched fists, already acquainted with mourning, in the creased snapshot you gave me. Really like that quite a bit. Okay, so this is, what did you say? Chapter 28. Also known as the last chapter. Pretty sure. Okay, while at New College, I took a class with Matt Gonzalez, a public defender in San Francisco, called The Law for Poets. Matt ran for and was elected to the Board of Supervisors. One of the controversial aspects of Matt's campaign was his switch from Democratic Party to the Green Party shortly before Election Day. The Green Party emerged as a challenge to the two-party system. One night, I watched the Green Party convention on C-SPAN. Cornel West, Michael Moore, Phil Donahue were all on stage, each one just a little more awkward than the other. These were not the slick, highly groomed politicians seen in the other conventions. These were the folks I would have been friends with in junior high. These were the excessively studious, culturally rebellious, overly earnest kids who never got elected to student council. And Ralph Nader was the geekiest of them all. He stood, a pile of papers under his arm, Winona Duke's arm around his waist, swaying arrhythmically, while Patti Smith sang, "The People Have the Power." Voting for Ralph Nader was among the scariest things I ever did. I didn't believe he would win. I was terrified of a Bush presidency, but Nader was the candidate that most reflected my views on public policy. Voting for Clinton felt hopeful. Voting for Nader felt moral. And my mother wanted to vote for him. My mother is a savvy consumer. Before she buys a tomato or a car, she does research to find the highest quality and the best price. She has been a longtime financial supporter of Ralph Nader's consumer watchdog organization, Public Citizen. She believes him to be a truly honest man. For the first time in decades, my mother wanted to vote for the same candidate. My mother and I wanted to vote for the same candidate, neither a Republican or a Democrat. In what I believe to be an atavistic response, my mother voted for the Republican candidate. On a visit to my mother's home, we had a conversation about politics that harkened back to my early teenage years. Mom, he wants to drill for oil in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. My mother's eyebrows raised, looking into her bowl of grapefruit sections. While she gathered her response, Ken chided her for her Republican fidelity. I pushed Cheerios around in my bowl. Sitting at the breakfast table with the news of George Bush's dubious election victory being discussed on Good Morning America, we were all sucked into the fray. Well, she rebounded, her gray eyes refocusing, and then honing in on the spoon she was raising to her mouth. I was going to write to him and tell him not to do that. She slipped a bit of grapefruit between tight lips. And she would write to him. I knew she would. She would summon up her sense of daughter of the American Revolution entitlement and pound out a well-reasoned letter about the importance of the natural conservation. My mother regularly writes to the greetings office at the White House whenever a friend has a 50th anniversary or 80th birthday to request that they send special greetings from the President and First Lady. I'm not sure how many people know that the White House has a greetings office that honors such a service. My mother knows. It's her White House. She learned this from her mother. I'd like to say I learned it from them too, but no. And then there was September 11. On November 6, 2002, Sarah Jane Olson, who had been involved with the SLA, pleaded guilty to an attempted bombing of 2 police cars in 1975. Olson said she was not involved with the bombing, but she did not believe she could get a fair trial in the post-9/11 atmosphere. I imagined myself having tea with Ms. Olson in the apartment in San Francisco I shared with Robin. Her life is Mr. Snyder's crumbled can. I asked my mother if she had written her letter to Bush about the oil drilling. She had done her research, gathered information from the Sierra Club, and it was sitting on her desk beside her typewriter. But she doesn't want to distract the president during a time of war. Because I was interested in how Matt Gonzalez would do as supervisor, I began watching the board meetings on Government Access TV. San Francisco now had district elections. The board of supervisors that came out of those elections is a portrait in democracy. They are the glossy, politically savvy centrist supervisors and the radical, rough, earnest supervisors. My own district supervisor, Aaron Peskin, was smart and articulate. The meetings were compelling, and I wanted more information about local issues. For the first time, I understood all those ballot initiatives. But in one San Francisco election, there was less than a 30% turnout. Ballots were moved from City Hall because of fears of anthrax. 5 days later, there was still no complete tally. Because a public power measure initiative trailed by only 300 votes, a recount was requested. The memory of my grandmother as a streamer-covered table haunts me. Was it really simpler then, or was I just too young to understand? What does it mean to be a political person now? And how do politics determine identity, or identity determine politics? Because I am fat, I experience, quote, the damnable injustice of being born inside a body categorically destined for exclusion from the world enterprise, unquote. Having a comfortable seat in a movie theater became a certainty after a coalition of fat activists lobbied San Francisco Board of Supervisors to add height and weight to the diversity chart. There are only 4 places where this is true: Santa Cruz, Washington, D.C., Michigan. In those few places, I have the legal right to demand access to something that many people take for granted. In the days after 9/11, I was worried about the people of Arab descent. Stories were circulating daily about hate crimes. An old man in Oakland had been attacked. Mosques were vandalized. My mother asked, "Are there any Muslims at your school?" "Yes, Mom, I know some Muslims." "Well, just be nice to them." She meant be afraid. Don't antagonize. She was sitting at a table on the patio of my college because I was I was sitting at a table on the patio of my college because I was smoking. I still sometimes smoke when I was sad or angry. I smoked when I felt helpless. A young woman with almond skin and long black hair was walking toward me. Except for the logo loyal generic clothing she wore, she looked like a person from any number of Arab countries. I smiled a welcome. "I thought you might be interested in this," she said sweetly and handed me an orange flyer. It was an advertisement for an MLM company with a health kit, aka diet plan. In a corner text box, a name and telephone number had been handwritten. I imagine it was hers. "Oh, no, thank you." I tried to sound as sweet as she had. I was fat. I must be interested in a diet product. I must not know that I can lose weight. I must not have tried. I pulled deeply at the end of my smoke and pushed the exhale through my nose. My revolution is a personal one. My relationship with my body feels political. It is a revolution of the body which incorporates all the things I discovered during my wandering years. The strength of that individuation has made my awareness of my place in the community more acute. Writing all this feels emotionally like I imagine deep sea diving might feel physically. I go deeper and deeper to find the really beautiful parts. And if I surface too fast, I get the bends. Writing all this feels like archaeology. As I write, the memories surface and overwhelm me. When I say that I am fat, I am taking back the simplicity of the word. It means I have adipose cells that are full. It shouldn't have been the thing that defined me before anything else. It's true about me, but it feels like it did. Let me say that again. It shouldn't have been the thing that defined me before anything else. That's true about me, but it feels like it did. For a while, I went to a church on Sundays. The name of the church was Glide. It's a church known for diversity, feeding people, and activism. There's always a long line of people in front of Glide. They're waiting to be fed. There is a low-income housing project next to the church and a daycare center down the street. It felt right to be in a church that does so much to take care of people. Every Sunday there was a lot of music, great gospel music. Every Sunday we would clasp our hands and shake our butts and feel the Spirit. And to my mother's delight, it was a Methodist church. She visited me in San Francisco when we went to Glide on Sunday. It wasn't her cup of tea, but she liked that there were so many people in church. People at Glide are quick to tell you that they are many things. Jewish, gay, lesbian, all colors, shapes, and sizes. It's all about diversity. And even I felt squeezed at Glide. The church gets very full and the ushers start pushing people into the pews. I felt like they looked at me with disapproval as if I were taking up too much space. They would bring people to sit in the pew with me and we all felt pushed together. Sometimes, just like on the bus, people would get up and move to another pew and the usher would seat someone else. I would sit there and cry. I would cry because I could feel how important it was to know you were part of something larger. I would cry because I've lost a key and I can't find it. Of all the ways I've looked for God, God the Father, God the Lover, I remember the feeling of connection with something larger. Sometimes I have a feeling that just sitting beside a river, all thinking quieted. But it is not that I never have it anymore. It's harder to come by. There are no chants or scrolls or places to go. I just don't fit in. I stopped going to Glide and began to go to a fat women's swimming group on Sunday. After the swim, I could adopt my locker room vision. After the swim, I would adopt my locker room vision. I would keep my eyes focused on the shower handle, my clothing, my image in the mirror. But I'd see them out of the corner of my eyes. Rounded forms, rippled flesh. They were drying themselves, laughing, making plans to go to lunch. I remembered my mother's body while she changed her clothes. I remembered it in stages, aging, a new vein popping on a calf, a scar raising along the back of a knee. Her belly rose and fell with each diet trend. It was my mother's body. I never thought about it in terms of beauty. It was just the geography of her life. When I did my first diet, I stood in front of the mirror in our hall and sucked in my stomach. I arched my back and admired my breasts. I had the power of youth. I was beauty. Now I have scars and veins and a geography of my own. I look around the locker room now and see beauty. We live in a difficult world. We seek connection. All those things, those adjectives that describe us, race, ethnicity, class, gender, sexual preference, sexual identity, height, weight, all those qualifiers attract and repel. I take up space. No amount of sucking in my stomach, tucking my butt, tilting my body to one side or the other, squeezing through crowds makes a difference. Maybe you have found this and you are reading it and you think, I never thought of it like that. That is the hope, stripped as I am, that brings me to the page. So I guess there's a little last sort of chapter that I didn't notice, and I'm going to read it because it's short. Chapter 28. But there must be an end to this, a sharp end and clean silence, a steep and most serious withdrawal, a new and more succinct beginning. James A.G. I started writing this book in my 30s. I bought a large sketch pad and scrawled across the pages. No real editing, no sense of what I was doing. I thought my India story was a good one, and I thought I'd arrived at a conclusion. I had no idea. I wrote most of this version in my MFA program. I think it's in a binder on a shelf at the University of San Francisco, as are the books of my classmates. I've never gone to see it there, so I'm not sure. When I graduated, I honestly thought the book would be published and I'd be on talk shows making my case. I probably had watched too much Oprah. I did publish a few articles about yoga for a fat body and got paid. That was a thrill. When the first article was about to be published, they added the title, Yoga for a Problematic Body. Before it was published, I asked them why my body was problematic. To their credit, they changed it. All of the agents and publishers who have read any of the book liked it. I got lots of compliments, but no one thought it would sell. I was 50 when I graduated. I wasn't physically able to work in restaurants. My BA was in humanities, my MFA in writing. And at the time of this rewrite, I am 65. What I did for the last 15 years might seem a topic for another book. I worked for a few years at a computer game company, interesting and odd. I took care of Mom during the last years of her life, and I could absolutely write a book about that. But there's a specific purpose for this book. It has always been my sense that my weight made my life story interesting. There are many memoir autobiographies written by fat people, most of which end with weight loss. My story is not about weight loss. Age adds another layer to the experience of being fat. I am less mobile. My knees are worn out from standing on them in restaurants. My numbers are not bad. My blood pressure is okay. I've been borderline diabetic all my life, but I never crossed the line. My cholesterol is not too high. I know that as I get older, my body will be less able to handle things, and I may end up on medications, but I resist them. Mom left me a small condo and some income from her investments. I do yoga every day. I swim as often as I can. I do a few other things in an effort to stay as mobile as possible. I'm a food snob after years in the restaurant industry. I still love to cook and read about food. I never did find romantic love, which is sad. People say as you get older, you're less interested in romance and sex. That isn't true for me, but, I've lived in a dream world. If you catch me in a certain mood, I will say that I have failed at everything I've ever done. This is one way to look at it, but I didn't look at it. I didn't become a famous chef or own my own little cafe. I stopped singing altogether. I rarely even sing when I'm alone. I'm not really sure why. Baba said, nothing special. Only I am special. I have a different perspective on what counts as failure and what counts as success and how much either of them matters. I love editing my writing. It's hard to stop, but it's time to stop. Ow. So there's a poem at the end. I feel the need to read it. It's a Welsh poem from the 6th century via Alberto Manguel. I have seen a multitude of shapes before I assumed a consistent form. I have been a sword, a narrow variegate. Let's try this again. I have been a multitude of shapes before I assumed a consistent form. I have been a sword, narrow, variegated, and I will believe when it is apparent that I have been a tear in the air. I have been the dullness of stars. I have been a word among letter. I have been a book. Got a little confused during that. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Not sure what comes next. See you on TikTok, hopefully.